Well, here we are in another part of England. We're on the south coast, but take a look over here. Come over to the right a bit and just look at that beautiful rock formation. You can see a hole in the wall there coming over this way here towards the left. This enormous rock here. There were just some divers that swam through and climbed up over that cliff and then jumped down. And it's a very popular place. We're on Scratchy Bottom. I know it's an odd name, but that's the name of this area, Scratchy Bottom. Don't ask me where they got it from. There's some funny names in this part of southern England along the coast. And we're going along the coast, looking at these beautiful rock formations. Now we're going to talk and continue what we have been doing earlier. We mentioned earlier when we were in Brazil and also when we were down the coast further concerning the relevancy of the Qur'an, this book right here. And we've been talking about whether or not this book is really relevant for the 21st century. Muslims have always claimed that this book is the final revelation, therefore it's the final revelation for everyone, everywhere, at any time, and at any place. And I'm not so sure. We already looked at some of the problems for women when we were in Brazil, referring to the fact that, especially in chapter 4 and chapter 2, where women are certainly given second place status vis-a-vis men when it comes to law, when it comes to testimony, when it comes to marriage, when it comes to divorce, even when it comes to their own bodies. And it's fascinating in comparison with the Bible, which is very clear in 1 Corinthians 7 that a man's body is equal to a woman's body, that the testimony of a woman is certainly equal to a man. And when you see the greatest event in the history of mankind, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, it was a woman that Christ showed himself to, and to a group of women on their way to Bethany, proving that in first century Judaism, where the testimony of a woman was half of that of a man, Jesus felt it was important to show himself to a woman first. So now we're coming to another area of relevancy. And this is the one that probably most people know about, and that has to do with whether or not this book, the Qur'an, is a book of peace or whether it's a book of violence. Peace or violence. And when you open its pages, you can see that looking at this book, you almost have to divide it in half. Now, this book goes from right to left because it follows the Arabic. It is translated into English. This is the Hilali and Khan translation. But the translation is not the Quran. It is nothing more than an interpretation of the meaning of the noble Quran, as they say. Most Muslims, and according to the editors of this one, the publishers, they are very clear that this book cannot be clearly translated. It can only be interpreted. So the English section is not the Quran, the Arabic. And so we're going to go to the Arabic and we're going to look at the Arabic. We're going to use English, obviously, since I'm speaking in English. But when you take a look at this book and you look at this half versus this half, the first half versus the second half, this is Medinan. Rule of thumb, most of the chapters and the verses in this are Medinan. The second half, rule of thumb, is mostly Meccan. There are some Medinan verses there are some Meccan verses here, but rule of thumb. And because of that, you need to almost contrast these two halves. Because when you look at this half, when you look at this part of the Quran, which is the Meccan surahs, you will find peaceful verses. Probably the one that Muslims like to claim the most. Verse 6. There's only 6 verses, and that's why the Meccan surahs are at the end, but they are first revealed at the beginning according to Muslims from 610 to 622. They are much shorter. Whoever put the Quran together, put the largest verses first and the smallest verses last. And so this is a very short verse, only 6 verses long. And at the very end, number 6, it says, "To you be your religion, and to me my religion." And that's really the best you're going to get in the Quran when you're talking about peace and violence. Now, there are other verses we're going to go to that Muslims claim. I remember when I was at the House of Lords, and we were trying to confront the Islamic courts here in Britain quite a number of years ago. And in came Lord Ahmed into the House of Lords, and he put his books down, turned towards us, and he said, "Why are you even confronting us? For it says very clearly in the Quran that we are peaceful people, that there is no compulsion in religion." And I remember raising my hand and I said, Lord Ahmed, do you know where that's found? And he says, well, no, I'm not a theologian. I said, well, that's found in chapter 2, verse 256. And I said, have you read the rest of the verse? If you look at chapter 2, verse 256, you will see very clearly that, well, let me just read it to you because you can see that there is a problem with that. Chapter 2, verse 256, the one they quote the most, says, there is no compulsion in religion. That's how it begins. Verily, the right path has become distinct from the wrong path. Whoever disbelieves in Taghut and believes in Allah, then he has grasped the most trustworthy handhold and will never break. And Allah is all here and all knowing. Then verse 257 continues on with that same idea. Allah is the wali, that means the protector, of those who believe. He brings them out from darkness into light. But as for those who disbelieve, their awliya, that means their supporters, are taghut, that means false. They bring them out from light into darkness. Those are the dwellers of the fire, means they're going to go to hell. Now tell me if there's no compulsion. So when you read the very next verse, you will see that it completely contradicts chapter 2, verse 256. But this is not for us. This is not directed at us. It's directed at Muslims. It's warning Muslims. You are either a believer or you're an unbeliever. And if you are, there's no compulsion. However, if you disbelieve, you're going straight to hell. So in some ways, be careful about using that verse as Muslims. And so he then said, well, yes, but there is a verse in the Quran and that says that if you are attacked, do not go beyond the limit. So just defend yourself. Not start the attack, just defend yourself. And I said, well, do you know where that's found? And of course, he didn't know where that was found. And I said, well, you need to continue on. And I said, well, if you want to find out where that's found, you need to go to chapter 2, verse 190. In chapter 2, 190 is where you quote it. And it says, and fight in the way of Allah those who fight you, but transgress not the limits. So in other words, it looks like defend against those who are actually fighting you. So what limits are you not to go beyond? Why don't you continue reading? Read what it says after that. And kill them wherever ye find them, and turn them out from where they have turned you out. And al-fitna is worse than killing. And fight not with them and the al-masjid, unless they fight you there. But if they attack you, then kill them. So once you've killed me, what limits are you not to go beyond? So that's not really a peaceful verse. It's very much the eye for an eye and tooth for the tooth that you see in the Old Testament, which is also found in chapter 5 of the Quran as well. So it's fascinating that he could not come up with any reference. Finally, he ended with what he thought was the clincher. And he says, yes, but the Quran is very clear that he who takes the blood of one, it's if he takes the blood of all, but he who saves the blood of one, it's if he saves the blood of all. And this is, and I said to him, do you know where that's found? And I said, that's found in chapter 5, verse 31 and 32. In fact, that verse specifically is verse 32. So let's go to chapter 5, verse 32. And when you look at it, it says very clearly that this has nothing to do with the Muslims. In fact, read the beginning of the book, of the verse. Chapter 5, verse 32. Because of that, we ordained for the children of Israel. So this is for just the Jews. And I know Lord Ahmed is not a Jew. I said, that is for the Jews. If you want to know what is for the Muslims, not that he who takes the blood of one, it's if he takes the blood of all. That has to do with the children of Israel. More specifically, it has to do with the verse that precedes it, verse 31, which is talking about the blood of Abel, who was killed by his brother Cain. And it's talking about that blood of Abel. You need to go to verse 33, the very next verse, to see what you're to do. And there it says, the recompense of those who wage war against Allah and his messenger and do mischief in the land is only that they shall be killed or crucified, or their hands and their feet be cut off from opposite sides. That's the verse you should have read. And I said, look at the Quran. You need to read the context. You need to read the whole verse. You need to read the verse that follows it to know how to apply that verse. So those three verses, chapter 2, verse 256, chapter 2, verse 190, and chapter 5, verse 32 and 33, that are very clear. These are not peaceful verses. These are full of compulsion. They are to kill you if you are in fighting with them. And certainly, those who disobey Allah and his prophet Muhammad, they are to be crucified and their hands and feet cut off from opposite sides. Not very pleasant and not very peaceful. So I still ask Muslims, where are these peaceful verses? Show me one peaceful verse in the Quran, in this book, that says you are to have peace with me. Now we're going to continue on, and we're going to look and unpack some other verses that are much more specific and much more violent. But meanwhile, it seems odd to be talking about violence here in such a peaceful place. Look at these kids crawling the rocks up here. They're having a good time as they're going to swim back down through that hole. Just a beautiful part of the coast of England. It's nice to be here with you. It's nice to introduce you to it. We've got to head on up and start going on north. This is Jade here in southern England. Over and out.